What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So we're on to week 2 of the Autumn Internationals. Week 1, technically, of the November Internationals. We've only just entered November, but we did have some games last week. So as we do in these preview videos, we're going to go over the teams that have been announced. They're going to be taking part in the games this week. Go over the players we think some good picks, some bad picks, and finally give a score prediction. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe. It's super quick, it's super easy, and it's free to do. Just click that red button if you enjoy this sort of content. So let's start off talking about France versus Australia. So we'll start off by talking about Australia first, because Australia last week, of course, did win that game versus Scotland. Bit of a controversial game, was extremely close, could have really gone either way. Reading a lot of different people's comments, they really felt Scotland deserved to win it. Some people were really happy that Australia managed to cling on to it. Kinghorn missing that kick right at the end really just sort of sealed out that game for them. But Australia weren't really firing on all cylinders. They had certain areas where they looked really, really good, but then there was a couple of attempts there. They could have got some tries, didn't really make the most of it, and managed to seal that game out by 1 point. If it wasn't for Kinghorn's missed kick, could have been a loss there. So I'm sure they'll have a lot to work on going into this game. Starting off talking about the team that's been announced for this week. So in the front row, we've got James Slipper, David Parecki, and Taniela Tupou. Now, the scrummaging last week, I believe Australia were the only ones who technically lost a scrum last week, even though the scrums weren't necessarily the most successful as they were going. But Taniela Tupou coming on the field did have some nice ball carrying as well. So nice to see him back in the side. In the lock department, there no changes there. Nick Frost and Catherine Neville going to be retaining in that lock position. The line-out situation last week wasn't terrible from what I remember. I feel like when the lineouts worked well, they actually were pretty successful. They definitely went for a couple of those driving mauls when they could do. It was more the throwing they had issues with if there was ever a problem with the lineout, not necessarily the actual jumpers themselves. In the back row, no switch-ups here either. Jed Holloway, Michael Hooper, and Rob Valentini in there again. So big ball carrying last week. Didn't see as much as Michael Hooper as I wanted to. Definitely had a couple of points where I thought he was doing well, but I thought return game might have been a bit more involved with the game, but hopefully we'll be getting into it this week. In the halfback partnership, Nick White and Bernard Foley. So Nick White coming in this week. I did actually think Tate McDermott did quite well last week, actually. I was quite impressed. That first half, especially for him, was really good. I really wish they'd maybe switched it off. I think maybe he should have come off about the 50th minute. They left him on into that sort of late 60s there. Nick White came on, actually made a big impact into the game from the bench, which was something you want to be seeing from an experienced player coming on. But I'm not sure if Tate McDermott's maybe been injured or had a little twinge there. Maybe they're just trying to mix it up a bit. I maybe would have stuck with him if he is fine and fit, but Nick White coming in, certainly no real loss to the side there because he's still a very good player. In the centre partnership, one switch here. Foketi comes in alongside Ikitau. Now, the centre partnership again quiet last week. Glenn Ikitau I actually thought was doing pretty well with running with the ball in hand. So that was nice to see from him. He's been very good throughout the Rugby Championship as well. So nice to see him keep on that top form. And then in the back three, Tom Wright, Andrew Kellaway, and Jock Campbell in that fullback shirt. Now, Andrew Kellaway had a rough game last week. It really wasn't going his way. There was a couple of real big issues for him. We saw drop balls. We saw rubbish passes. We saw kicks going absolutely nowhere. Just needs to settle down a bit more. Fortunately, France is not going to be the team to do it against. So we'll have to see how he gets on. Again, Tom Wright quiet really last week. And I'll try and keep a bit of a special eye out for Jock Campbell as well. So overall, 1-15, it's a good Australia team. It's quite similar to what we saw last week, only a couple of changes along the way. But a big adversary in France to try and overcome. In terms of the bench then, we have Falau Fingar, Matt Gibbon, and Tom Robertson coming in there. Will Skelton comes back into the side. Nice to see him coming back in. I think the last time I saw Will Skelton, I'm pretty sure I saw him get a red card. So maybe he's just coming back off that ban. Maybe he's come off some long-term leave. It's nice to see him in there. I have seen a bit of comments around Will Skelton. A lot of people not very confident in him for whatever reason to see him come into this side. I saw a lot of things on Twitter. People not very happy about Will Skelton being back in the side. I don't think he's a terrible player, but again, discipline. Just got to keep it under wraps there. Pete Samu will be joining him as well in that replacement forwards. Obviously, didn't get to play last week, Pete Samu. I believe picked up like an injury just pre-training or in the training. I wasn't really sure. They didn't really mention it on the commentary last week. So we didn't get to see him last week, but hopefully he's all fine and fit, ready for this game. And then in the replacement backs, Jake Gordon comes in. Hunter Paisami moved to the bench this week. And Rhys Hodge in that 23 shirt. Maybe they're thinking this could be one of those sorts of games that goes on until later. They saw the game last week. They maybe wanted to have some 3 points from longer range. Rhys Hodge is your man to get in there. I don't think Hunter Paisami played terribly last week. Interesting to see him move to the bench there. And then Jake Gordon coming in. You know, Dave McDermott doing well, but we'll have to see what Jake Gordon has to offer. But overall, I think that's a good Australian team. I think this is a good Australian team, but I just think they've got to work on that final percentage. I mean, they were doing so well against that Scotland team all the way up. They did 90% of the work, and then just pushing too hard was one of the things that came across for me in that Australia team. So they just need to just go through the phase a bit more, work themselves over for a try, because the France defence, as we know, certainly doesn't like conceding a lot of tries. Moving on to France then, who I believe are on an unbelievable winning streak at the minute. From all the research I can sort of do, I think they're currently on a 10-match winning streak as far as I've seen back. That goes all the way to about a year ago. I can't think of any game they've lost along the way. Maybe there was sort of like a France A team that played, but I really can't find anything. They did really well, of course, last year in their autumn internationals. They went on, they beat New Zealand. They've gone on to the Six Nations. They won the Grand Slam in the Six Nations. They had their summer internationals. They had 2 games against Japan in their summer tour. They beat them both. So France are looking on good form. I'm really excited to see this France team get back into action. So starting off in this front row, we have Cyril Bay, Julien Marchand, and Antonio in that front row. And that's a big front row. Obviously, this France team knows what they like to bring now in terms of the forward pressure. Southern Hemisphere teams like their forwards games. We see it all the time. Scrums, mauls, whether it's from South Africa, Argentina, Australia, all these teams, they love their forwards game. So being able to dominate the front pack game is going to be a big area in this one. I think there's 3 really good lads there, especially when Cyril Bay and Julien Marchand are also incredible on the jackal. So not only have you got big boys in scrummaging, but also in tackles, you've got to clear them out absolutely constantly. There's a reason they're currently the Six Nations champions. In the lock department then, Cameron Vogui comes in alongside Flamand, which again, another good mix up there. I think Cameron Vogie's been extremely good since he came onto the scene. He only came onto the scene for me personally, international France team, a couple of years ago really. I think when we had the Amazon Autumn Nations Cup, I think was maybe one of the first games I ever saw Cameron Vogui in, and now he's an absolute staple in this team. So nice to see him retain there. And then in this back row we have Jalange, Charles Olivon, and Gregory Aldrit. So strong 1-8. I think this could be a big power game. I'm sure France will like to expand it out a bit, use their backs a little bit. They want to show off in France. They want to make the most of a game like this. But having a strong set of forwards. Nice to see Charles Olivon coming back in this side, actually. It doesn't say here who is captain. I'm not sure who's actually been named captain for this game based on this. But there's a lot of extremely talented and experienced players in this front pack. In the halfback partnership then, Antoine Dupont alongside Ntamack. Now, we have seen a couple of switch-ups within the last sort of year and a half or so, where we've been seeing Ntamack try out this inside centre position with France. They might have put Jalibert on, and then you sort of create the dual fly half position that you can do. Personally, I quite like Ntamack at 10. I quite like retaining him there and having 2 dedicated centres that actually play like their own certain games. So I sort of like what they've gone down here. As I've said that, I've just realised it literally says next to Dupont's name, a big letter C to say he's the captain. So Dupont is the captain. Of course he was. He was actually the captain through the Six Nations. Now they've started remembering. I've got to have all this information flood back to me. But again, I think there's a wealth of experience in there. There's a really high cap. I'd like to know what the team caps are actually for this, because there's some really experienced players here. In the centre partnership, Jonathan Darty alongside Ficou. Again, just we know what these lads bring. Dante is an absolute machine when he just runs forwards. I don't want to be the guy in front of him. Ficou in there as well, defensive captain, absolutely dominating throughout the Six Nations. Thought he was incredibly good in that Six Nations terms of defence. And then finally in this back 3, Mofane, Damien Pinot, and Ramos in that fullback position. So overall, this is a really good France team. I think this might be the first game France have played since playing that Japan team in the summer, I believe, anyway. And they brought the big guns. They obviously want to make sure they put a bit of a testament down. Had anyone seen the world rankings video? Of course, France currently sitting very close. They won't want to be dropping any points away from taking that number 1 spot coming around to the World Cup next year. So if they can get there and they can beat teams like Australia, there's no worries with putting on the big boys. In the finishers then, we have Mao Vaca, Priso and Falatea. Hopefully pronouncing that name correctly. Priso and Falatea. A couple of names I'm not that familiar with. I'm sure they probably played at some point. I've probably seen them along the way, but I don't know them. But Mao Vaca, on the other hand, is a name we do all know quite well. Very low on cap still. Mao Vaca feels like, again, another lad you just see in, week out in this France team. But he's actually quite low in terms of the caps, but he's an exceptional player, especially when you see him coming in that second half. A lot of speed on him, loves running with the ball in hand. It's nice to see there. The rest of the replacement forwards then, we have Taufai Fanua, Garasi and Makalu. So the 6-2 split. They're obviously leaning towards a forwards game. They obviously know it's going to be a physical game. Australia have had to play one game as well, so there might be a couple of players still recovering a little bit from that one. So put on the big boys, go for some driving maul tries. Why not? Keep that defensive work rate up. We know Sean Edwards doesn't want to see any defensive mishaps in this game. And then finally, in the replacement backs, then we have Luku and Jalibert in there as well. Now, the 6-2 split's always difficult because where do you go with the replacement backs? Who fills in where? I think this is a nice mix-up here. Luku can come in there as well. I mean, Antoine Dupont, you'll probably want to see play a good chunk of the game, I would imagine. I don't imagine we'll be seeing him come off at half-time or anything. So, but always useful to have that other replacement scrum half in. That's normally what teams do in the 22 shirt when they do the 6-2 split. Jalibert in the 23 shirt, again, I think this is quite a nice call here. The way the team's mixed up, Jalibert can come on at 10. I also think he's got quite good experience as well at playing fullback as well, so he can cover that position. And then if a centre goes out injured, you put Jalibert on at 10. You move Entermac into a centre position potentially. So I think there's some good coverage there. Wingers may be the only one, but again, even that, you can sort of stretch it out a bit. Let's say you had Damien Pinot come off. I don't think it would be outside the realms of possibility to put Jalibert on at 10, Entermac move into that centre position, and then maybe you see like Ficou move on to the wing. I think they've got real nice coverage in this backfield as well. So overall, this France team looks pretty monstrous. I think this could be a pretty good game for France. So in terms of a score prediction, what do we think? Well, you may have already guessed as I've been talking through it, then I really think this France team is looking extremely good. Australia, for me, weren't quite hitting the mark last week, only just scraping by, maybe through luck, whatever you want to call it last week. So personally for me, I'm going to say this is going to be a France win. I'm going to say by a bit, actually. I actually feel like this could extend out a bit further than people might expect. I'm going to say France to win by 11. Is going to be my prediction. But of course, guys, what do I know about rugby? Make sure you guys do drop down in the comments your thoughts on the game, your score predictions, all that fun stuff. And make sure you are putting your scores in on the Super Brew group, where, of course, we'll be going over the results on Monday. We've got the rest of the preview videos coming out over the next day or so. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel just to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.